Oh my mother, oh my mother, oh my mother, Holy Family, Mother of God. What a way to start the 2025 Formula One season. Because of what I'm about to show you in this summary and video analysis, Formula One is the best motorsport competition by far. The season opened at Albert Park, and what happened was impressive. Spectacle everywhere, with all the drivers, all the rookies. My goodness, Briatore's report. What madness. Even though Doohan didn't last half a lap before wrecking the car, let's not throw too much hate at him because it was an absolutely chaotic race. The Doohan issue already came from yesterday. Check out previous videos. Here comes the summary of what has been one of the best races I've seen in Formula One history, and I've been watching Formula One since I was 9. How amazing! We got off to a strong start. Welcome to Sport Maniaticos, the Formula One section on YouTube. Enjoy and leave a huge like for Formula One this time because it was absolutely spectacular. And here's the thing, folks. I've got it all. I've got the Doohan incident, the two McLarens, the tough time Max had, Gasly's error that was brutally critical for Alpine. Unbelievable because they had it all under control. And in the end, it fell apart. Briatore must be thinking, my goodness, we had it. But it's not a day for blame, it's a day to celebrate the show. Today was a day when anyone could go off track. Fernando Alonso went off. Carlos Sainz went off. We're gonna see absolutely everything. The Grand Prix was about to begin. And before it started, you should know that Formula 2 and Formula 3 had issues because it rained a lot. We at Sport Maniaticos were keeping a close eye on the weather report. Check out who we caught on camera so you can see how vigilant we Sport Maniaticos are. While watching F2, waiting for the race to start, suddenly they show this image. Who could it be? The Sport Maniaticos already know. It's Colapinto from BWT. It was raining buckets. And he came down to F2 to talk with the team members he knows, obviously, reminiscing about old times. Take a look at the MP car. Colapinto was already hinting before the start that we were about to witness something spectacular. Let's get started because it truly was spectacular. During the formation lap, Hauger, the one who was supposedly better than Colapinto, remember? I'm going to tell a very long story in this summary. So here it begins. Hauger, I'm not going to make any disrespectful comments or anything. Hauger did this on the formation lap, right? Hauger, according to Helmut Marko, he was from the academy and obviously deserved the seat before Franco Colapinto. The Grand Prix began in spectacular fashion, and poor Hauger, I felt really sorry for him. The start was even aborted because of the conditions. Hamilton's father was spotted on camera too, consoling Hauger as he stood there dejected. What a start. Then we see Doohan. You know, I have all the cameras, all the onboard footage. This was Doohan's face before starting the race with raindrops already falling. He'd seen what happened to Hauger and was worried. Of course, actually, this particular photo was just before the start. You can see the mechanics nearby. That was Doohan's expression. The Grand Prix started and watch how the McLarens managed to hold their positions, but Verstappen, who we know is formidable in these conditions, did make a mistake later on. But he still drove a great race in that Red Bull. Look at Lawson. My goodness. When I show you Lawson again. And take a look at how Verstappen used the lasso technique. Impressive! It was an absolutely amazing start, I'm telling you. Formula One kicked off 2025 in the best possible way. Look at how Verstappen shot out like a torpedo while Norris tried to block him. Norris actually forced Verstappen to back off a bit, and when he did, Verstappen executed that switchback on Piastri. If he couldn't pass on one side, he'd pass on the other. That's how he does things. Wow. This reminded me of what happened in Brazil with Max Verstappen in the rain. Impressive. And if Norris hadn't done what he did, Verstappen could have taken the lead immediately. People often say Norris is soft. But look at what he did here. Shutting the door on Verstappen so he couldn't make the move. Norris had stated in interviews that things would change. And change they did. But wait until the end of the race, if it ever comes, because this summary is going to be incredible. We continued with the early action as Verstappen got ahead of Piastri. Suddenly, they showed an image that left us all stunned. Doohan. Half a lap on the very first lap, and he destroyed the car. This is a problem. Doohan overdrove all weekend, but we shouldn't pin everything on him. Although it's a serious mistake, one that directly cost millions under the budget cap. Half a lap in, and you wreck a car with 21 races to go. Was it overdriving or not? You decide. A day of difficult conditions. But let's be clear, he wasn't the first to drop out. Hauger was in the formation lap, but that's another story. Doohan just lost control in these conditions. We know he's a very aggressive driver. He's shown that many times. And that doesn't mesh well with the rain. He completely wrecked the Alpine, which is undoubtedly going to upset Briatore, I suppose. We press on though, because this disaster was only the beginning of what lay ahead in a Grand Prix where Doohan, seen here practically in tears, was obviously distraught. Those droplets in his eyes weren't just rain leaking through the visor. They were teary eyes, which is why I say we're not going to attack him too harshly here. He made a mistake like many others, including Fernando Alonso. We know that in wet conditions, it's very tough. Let's recall, for example, what happened with Colapinto in Brazil. So for me, yes, Doohan's mistake was big given the consequences, but what was even more serious was everything that happened from free practice onward. Damaged tires, problems, and then heading into qualifying compromised. And then in the end, more bad luck. Watch the summary. My goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, Holy Family, Mother of God, Briatore. I would have loved to see his face, but it wasn't shown. We did see Doohan's father on camera, obviously upset, understandably so. Then on lap 2, so you can see it's not just Doohan, Carlos Sainz also had a crash. He was following Gasly's Alpine, lost the car in extremely tricky conditions, and ended up out of the race as well. What we were witnessing was crazy, and it was only the second lap. He managed to get going again, but that was just the beginning of more chaos in a race so wild that you'd barely believe it. By lap 8, Norris was in first. Verstappen was slightly behind by 8/10. Piastri was third. Russell fourth. Leclerc fifth. Tsunoda doing great in sixth. Albon seventh with a spectacular drive. Hamilton eighth. Gasly ninth. He was having an excellent race until the final mistake that will blow your mind. Oh man, Gasly, no. You had such a strong race going, my friend. Alonso was 11th, Stroll was there, and Bortoleto 14th. Antonelli was 13th. He's been amazing this weekend, the real standout. With what happened in Italy, you can see how much he learned, arriving fully prepared, driving an outstanding race, and I won't spoil anything else for you just yet. They showed the usual positions gained and lost for anyone interested. Antonelli had already gained 3. Hülkenberg had also gained positions. Alonso moved up 2. Lawson gained 2, and so on. Verstappen gained 1, Piastri lost 1, etc. By lap 13, Piastri was closing in on Verstappen, and Alonso was also catching up to Gasly, showing that the Aston Martin could put pressure on the Alpine, unthinkable compared to Abu Dhabi. Max then went wide, allowing Piastri to overtake. If you look here, Max was ahead, and then Piastri passed him. That was Verstappen's error. Even so, Max drove brilliantly overall, holding a pace much higher than what the car really had in such conditions. He nearly won, But in these opening stages, the car locked up the outside wheel, sent him off the track into a puddle, and he controlled it well because you could have easily spun out. Nevertheless, he lost position to Piastri, who had a car that was clearly far superior to Red Bull. Even in the rain, it was evident that this McLaren is extremely strong. Maybe not on the level of Red Bull in 2023, but perhaps even more than the early 2024 Red Bull. The laps were unbelievably fast. For example, let me give you some times to highlight how crazy things were. Norris in 132, Piastri in 136, 133.3 for Verstappen, who had made a mistake and was now lapping in the 130-somethings, struggling because his car couldn't keep that pace. Russell was doing a 131.5 or 132. Then we had, for instance, Gasly and Alonso in 132.7 and 132.9. Meanwhile, Verstappen was telling his team that if the rain continued, he'd have to pit because the tires were degrading. Around then, Lawson also went off track. I think it was at the same place Hauger went off, though you can see the sign. And the corner might be around turns 8, 9, 10, or 11. Let me show you more lap times so you can see the difference between Verstappen's 1 minute 31.1 and Lawson's 1 to 32.8. That's 1.7 seconds per lap slower. Checo has never lost 1.7 seconds per lap compared to Verstappen. That's insane. That's why our beloved Checo, who we always carry in our hearts, would surely be smiling at home watching all this unfold. I want to show you again why I posted this screenshot. Norris in 1 minute, 32 seconds. Piastri in 1 minute, 29.7 seconds for a while, showing how unbelievably fast Piastri could be. Then Verstappen in 1 minute, 31.1 seconds, fighting a losing battle. He realized he just didn't have the pace. Suddenly, he was 9/10ths per lap, slower than the McLarens, which really highlights the difference in speed. He was on par with Russell, on par with Leclerc, who by then was doing better, and behind Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton, and about 1.1 to 1.4 slower than Gasly or Alonso or something along those lines. This means Verstappen might have remembered 2024 thinking he could fight, but in reality he couldn't. He just didn't have the pace. I can tell you this will irritate him a lot. Let's see how Hamilton was doing. Still adapting. Here's an example I wanted to show you. His steering wheel is turned one way, the tires the other, meaning he was sliding and counter-steering. At times, Hamilton even led this race briefly under certain conditions. Piastri was closing in, and you could see from the lap times that he was sometimes quicker than his teammate Norris. Meanwhile, Verstappen was already 15 seconds behind. Piastri was making it a tremendous race. On lap 30, McLaren told Piastri on the radio to hold position until a transition to dry tires. Piastri said, "I'm faster." At that time, Verstappen was 15.9 seconds behind, Russell was 9.5 behind Verstappen, and there was no immediate threat from anyone else. The so-called papaya rules had said they'd allow equal conditions, but here's a constructive criticism for McLaren. I love your team, but if you say you'll let them race, then under certain conditions you can't just forbid them from fighting. I get it. There was only one dry line, and passing could be dangerous. But F1 has often been dangerous. In 81, 82, 84, 88, and so on. So please, let's keep providing the show. You've got a car that looks like a championship winner if everything continues this way. I understand securing points, but let's also note something positive. Later on, they did let them fight. However, at that specific moment when Piastri was 0.6 behind, they didn't. So Piastri made a mistake ending up in the gravel. Look at the fans' faces. This guy here, or the one in orange who really stands out. Piastri dropped to 2.7 seconds behind on lap 33, 3 laps after that. Then they said, "All right, now you can race." I'm including it here to be transparent. If it were dry and they were zero point 0.6 apart, maybe they would have let them duel. The recap doesn't show that, so I want to clarify. There was only a narrow dry line, and if you went off it, especially Piastri at his home race, wanting to fight for the lead, where do you brake without risking contact or forcing the other off? That's dangerous. I get McLaren's viewpoint, but if they had let them duel at that moment, this summary would award them an even higher mark. Not that it wasn't already a fantastic race, just a tiny constructive critique. Next came the disaster. Alonso, on lap 34, crashed as well. Look at how he lost control in a fast corner that doesn't seem well suited to the Aston Martin, and he was just a passenger. A real shame, because with so many eliminations, Alonso might have achieved more. Please, Newey, show up already. We need you. A disaster. The car was a mess. With Alonso's crash, many took advantage of the safety car period to pit. Tsunoda, Albon, Hamilton, Gasly, Norris. Almost everyone pitted under the safety car, or nearly everyone. Here you can see the tires they ended up with after pitting. For instance, Aston Martin chose the medium. They all swapped from the intermediate except Ocon and Berman, who stayed on intermediates. Everyone selected what they thought best. Notice that some opted for the hard tire. Norris and Piastri, for example, while Verstappen went for something slightly softer, presumably easier to heat up in the cold. Russell also went for the hard. Leclerc went for the hard. Everyone knows their car and picks accordingly. Gasly was 9th at the time and went to the hard tire, while Antonelli found himself 10th, already in a points position. Bortoleto got a penalty for an unsafe release. The proof is obvious. They restarted around lap 41. The sun almost seemed to appear, but there would be more rain. We resumed, and on lap 42, Ferrari told Leclerc that Class 3 rain would arrive in 3 laps. Leclerc replied, "Class 3 is a lot." Let me explain a little strategy I noticed in F1 that I think they're refining, albeit with limited room to improve. They're handling it very cleverly, so I'll detail it quickly. Here's the deal. Leclerc was warning them because the drivers know the game. I'll explain. When Class 3 rain comes, it's very heavy. The problem is that with these ground effect cars, even the full wet Pirellis can't clear that much water. Pirelli wants to improve this, having done wet tests, but right now that's the situation. So when heavy rain falls, they have to stop the race. We saw it multiple times last year, and I recall maybe in 2023 it happened too. Some cars end up off the track, others pit for maximum wet tires, different from the intermediates we see now. Then some remain on slicks, driving absurdly slow, maybe 7-minute laps, but they save a pit stop. Then the race gets red flagged, and the ones who pitted lose out big time. When I heard Leclerc's radio message, I suspected he was trying to play that game, but F1 did not stop the race. They said, "Keep going, we're monitoring the danger." Because obviously F1 has to prioritize safety, but the cars are so safe these days, and conditions weren't quite that extreme. So F1 said, "Nah, carry on," which was excellent. Top marks, because everything about this was so well done. What a joy to wake up early for Australia. Everything was wonderful. On lap 44, Norris was pulling away from Piastri by 2.7 seconds. This race was insane. Earlier, Piastri was 6/10 faster. Now Norris was 6/10 faster. It's going to be a spectacular championship fight between them. I can't wait. Luckily, we only have to wait a week. Verstappen was falling behind. Albon was 7th. Tsunoda was 5th. What a crazy race. Tsunoda in 5th. Lawson 14th. That says it all. Gasly was holding on in 9th. We know Alonso, Sainz, Doohan, and Hauger were out. Then the rain seemed to return a bit, and Piastri went off track. Actually, both McLarens went off. Look here. Piastri's already out wide. Norris also went off earlier. On the next corner, you see how Piastri was really fired up. He'll be calmer in other races, but you can tell he was home, in tough conditions, with a chance to win. It was spectacular with this super McLaren, maybe the best car on the grid, both of them leaving the track in the same corner. This was getting more and more exciting, and it was about to get even better. Check out what happened next. Norris kept going, didn't pit despite the off-track excursion. The two McLarens panicked after going off in the rain and decided to pit, whereas Verstappen did not pit. Maybe he was thinking about the very strategy I just explained, or maybe because he saw that the rain wasn't that heavy. After all, the McLarens had both gone off, but he hadn't. So he didn't pit right away. Gasly, who had been 7th by then, Tsunoda holding 4th, Verstappen 5th, Russell 6th. Gasly pitted having held on, Albon 7th, Lawson still 9th, Antonelli 10th, who had pitted earlier, and so on. And here came Lawson to deliver the grand finale. As if he hadn't had enough trouble the previous day, he lost the car under pressure from Bortoleto, plus gas behind, trying not to let them pass on the next corner. He made a mistake very similar to Doohan's, though the damage to his car was less than Doohan's, I think. Still, it was another setback, finishing off Lawson's weekend. Incredible, really. Lawson, who, let me emphasize, was supposedly better than Colapinto according to Helmut Marko. Well, Helmut Marko, I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. We'll see what happens next time. For now, it's clear he's not better than Colapinto, so maybe think twice before speaking, friend. At that point, Norris was already leading. He had passed Hamilton and Leclerc. Verstappen was on Russell's tail, Antonelli was moving up, and the cameras showed the crowd's reaction whenever Piastri slid off. Leclerc also had a 360 spin that didn't cost him too much. He recovered quickly. Then on lap 48, the Ferraris gave up and pitted, emerging 9th and 10th. Norris and Verstappen regained the lead. Russell was 3rd, Albon 4th, and Antonelli, the only surviving rookie, was in 5th place. Impressive. Gasly was 8th, Hülkenberg in a spectacular 7th. Bortoleto also had trouble and ended up retiring, losing the car too. That's what I was saying. Bortoleto, who I consider a better driver than Doohan, also wound up out of the race. Alonso, Sainz, and so many others also ended up out. To be fair, Doohan was the one who totaled the car the fastest. Half a lap might be a record. But I won't dwell on that. I found his issues from yesterday more significant. Check out the positions gained and lost again. Verstappen gained 1, Russell and Albon gained 2, Antonelli in 5th had gained 11. Stroll, about whom we're often critical, had climbed 7 spots and was in 6th. Hülkenberg, in that worst car on the grid, was 7th, up 10 positions. And he really needed it because Bortoleto had been breathing down his neck. On the flip side, Piastri had lost 11 positions and the 2 Ferraris were also way down. Madness. And Formula One was showing it all in glorious style. Berman was a lap behind. Lawson out. Bortoleto out. Doohan out. Hauger out. And there was Antonelli, the star who kept going. Let me correct myself earlier. I said Doohan was the first to retire in half a lap, but actually Hauger was out even faster. He didn't even make a 10th of a lap on the formation lap. Hauger has a separate track record altogether, and we're still early in the season. By lap 52, the action picked up yet again. Only 57 laps in total, and I thought that might not be enough to quench our thirst for excitement. But wow, it delivered. Norris was in first, then Verstappen. Man, the guts on that Dutchman. He never stops. How many consecutive championships does he have? 3 in a row, I believe. He just doesn't give in. He wants more. And he knows Norris. Well, I think he suspects. This is my objective opinion. Take it or leave it. Today, if you were really watching the timing data at the start, you'll have noticed that while Norris was up to 20 seconds ahead, Verstappen closed that gap in 5 or 7 laps, pushing incredibly hard in these conditions. It's telling of both Norris and Verstappen. You draw your own conclusions. When it rains, Verstappen, who has improved so much in the wet, he used to make a few more mistakes, like the one we saw earlier. Remember 2023, he'd lock up or spin. Last year in Brazil, he drove maybe his best race by far. Today wasn't on that same level, but you need to be observant. If you look at the times, Norris was pulling away by a second per lap, and then a few laps later, Verstappen was back within half a second, unbelievably aggressive. Meanwhile, Leclerc and Hamilton were also battling. Check out how Leclerc tried to pass on the outside. They touched with Leclerc's rear tire, brushing Hamilton's front wing. Absolute chaos. Oh wait, that might actually have been footage of Hamilton's spin from the previous day. An insane moment. Regardless, Leclerc was making it clear to Hamilton who was boss. That's when disaster struck for Gasly. He had been doing great, running 8th, scoring valuable points for Alpine that they really need right now, especially with everything we've seen in telemetry at the start of the season and the budget cap fiasco from Doohan's lap 1 crash, which could cost them millions. Suddenly, with maybe 1 or 2 laps to go, Gasly pulled the move that made us all say, "No, don't do that, Gasly." And Gasly is a fantastic driver, he really is. But with the Ferraris behind him, cars that are much faster, he got onto the grass at one point, maybe cutting across. Listen, Gasly, the gardener job at Melbourne is already taken, my friend. No need to volunteer. After that, Leclerc flew by, having already stripped Hamilton of his pride just moments before, and Hamilton passed too. You can see it in the footage. Who's that behind him? The best car on the grid, Piastri. Oh no, Gasly was in 10th, with Piastri pushing for that final point. For newcomers, 10th place is the last point scoring position, just like how you get the 10th position in Sport Maniaticos to do the pole. In that moment, Verstappen was 1.2 seconds off the lead, not giving up. Albon was 4th, Antonelli 5th, Stroll 6th, Hülkenberg 7th, ahead of the Ferraris of Leclerc and Hamilton, and Gasly had that last point. Madness. Piastri was right on him, and sure enough, he overtook him. That cost Alpine the point they desperately needed. True, Leclerc and Hamilton and Piastri have faster cars, but Gasly had been holding them off valiantly until that slip-up. It wasn't necessary. He was putting together a fantastic race. My goodness, Max, because look, he was just about 1 second behind Norris, maybe a bit more, but essentially a second or so faster. I've shown you the lap times. You can check for yourself. Verstappen was back to 0.5 seconds behind, regaining DRS, about to launch a final assault, but Norris pulled out all the stops, refusing to let him pass, and held on to first place. So he stayed in first, folks. That's how the race ended. Norris, Verstappen, and Russell on the podium. Fully deserved. A thoroughly deserved 4th place for Antonelli, a well-deserved 5th for Albon, and also very well-deserved 6th and 7th for Stroll and Hülkenberg. Those top 7 should be super happy. The only one who won't be is Verstappen because he's so fierce. He always wants to win. Calm down, man. Give Norris a chance. Of course, in dry conditions, Verstappen probably couldn't have done what he did in the rain. Conditions were equalized, which also says a lot about both drivers. That's just my subjective opinion. Don't give it too much weight. Norris was lacking something last year, although that opening lap aggression I showed you might mean he's growing in confidence. Leclerc ended 8th. What a disaster for Ferrari. Hamilton was 10th, Piastri 9th. They didn't fight for victory at all. It was all or nothing, and in the end, it was nothing. And Gasly wound up 11th, also with nothing. A shame for Alpine, which still can't get their act together, though he did hold on until that era. 12th was Tsunoda, 13th Ocon, 14th Berman. A special shout out to Antonelli, who in my opinion could be the driver of the day. That was incredible. Albon did very well. Verstappen also drove brilliantly. Norris had to win. Russell is always consistent in these conditions. And Hülkenberg and Stroll got great results too. All in all, an excellent inaugural race for Formula One, which without doubt showed that this season will be absolutely spectacular. It also showed that Alpine must be very cautious because they need to field their best, as Briatore said. Take note of that. And we saw Colapinto in F2 again. I'll leave it at that as we say goodbye because we were missing something in this race. Our friends, Colapinto included. Seeing how things went this weekend, I believe we might see him in F1 during the 2025 season as well. Hopefully very soon. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What a race! Thanks to all the sport maniaticos who stayed awake with me like champions at the neighborhood bar. You're amazing, sport maniaticos.